Before we jump into the heart of this video, I want to make it abundantly, unmistakably clear that the point is not for me to scold modern players and say back in the day so-and-so was better and all that stuff. I have my preferences on the subject, which I'm sure will be clear, but it's not me blaming the modern player base for whatever. It's more a reflection on how the game has changed in regards to the subject of cheese and what this means in practical terms, how it manifests in tournament form, and what it might even say about the game of Pokemon itself. So, before we start looking at the replays, I have to emphasize something that might be a bit of a foreign concept to a more modern player, or actually even veterans at this point, depending on when you joined. But back in the days of Generation 4, when I joined, then there was this carryover from the previous couple generations. And that was the idea that there was, in fact, honor in Pokemon battling. And this carried over into Black and White 1, and I think it started changing around Black and White 2, XY, but it didn't really start taking off until sometime in Gen 6, and then really exploding in Gen 7. That's not really the point. Or during the time of Gen 6 and Gen 7, not necessarily just in those gens. I mean, the replay we're going to start off with here is from Gen 4, of course. But the idea of there being honor, and I will have a link to this thread in the pinned comment, then it was present in Generation 3. So we look at this post from Gene, who was one of the most decorated Advanced players when Advanced was just current gen. There's a stigma to BP teams. If you're using them, you're admitting you need to get lucky to win by facing a team that can't handle BP because they don't take skill to use and they are difficult to answer without niche counters. That's the basic argument of why Baton Pass is banned, right? And when people say, how did it take Baton Pass so long to get banned in so many generations? Well, a big reason is because of this honor code of the, I guess we can call them the old guard. Because back then, the community was a lot smaller. There was a big community explosion in Generation 4 because Wi-Fi battling made competitive Pokemon so much more accessible, and then that carried over to simulators. But the idea with the smaller community, because even the Gen 4 explosion was still very, very small compared to the last several generations, then it was a lot smaller of a community, and that meant that people knew each other a lot more and cared about each other's opinions. Now, you could say that today's Smogon tournament scene is still very insular and everyone knows each other and so on, but they definitely are not afraid of winning via what would be referred to as dirty tactics. Whereas before, there weren't like trophies to win, or as many trophies to win. There were very few. I don't know if that necessarily relates to it, but it was playing the game to show that you were good at the game, not just to get a win any way possible. Because if you win with Baton Pass, for example, because that's the best cheese example, if you win with Baton Pass, you didn't really prove that you were skilled. You showed that when you had the baseline level of competence to not mess up a good matchup for Baton Pass, because BP plays itself. That's the basic idea of what cheese is. Because there's all sorts of stuff that can be considered cheesy. It's not just a couple different strategies or playstyles that have been designated as such. No, there are all sorts of ways you can be cheesy. You can be cheesy with your moves. Like, for example, in like certain lead matchups in Advanced, this is a hot topic of debate. But it can be argued that if you do things like stay in with Skarmory on Zapdos, then that is a cheesy move. So we're not getting hung up on the definitions. We'll come back to how that kind of thing manifests in current play. But the basic idea, and the reason I'm scrolling through this thread is because I'm getting to another post which illuminates this more clearly. This idea of honor. Actually, here's the second one. A lot you see from Sinray. I don't know how to say his name. A lot of what deterred BP before, which I guess people can't seem to imagine, was a culture thing. It didn't stop everyone, but it stopped most people. That's why it was so rare. That's why nobody even thought of banning BP back in the day. Other than I think German sites played without it, but like by and large, that wasn't the case. We had a smaller, tighter community, and people cared about being respected, which is a very foreign idea. I mean, I guess it was kind of a foreign idea back in 2011 when the BP thing first started kicking off, but so I can't even imagine what it must sound like to someone who's come around at any point after then. Yeah, when BP was used, the the user was often someone who was a sleazeball or was in matches where everyone knew they were a superior opponent, whipped out their BP team in order to try to eke out a win they didn't really have to earn. But from experience, I didn't experience this when Gen 3 was the current gen, but I experienced it when Gen 4 was the current gen. And the basic idea was that even this idea of I'm against someone I know is better than me, so I'm going to try and cheese them with something like Baton Pass, that was very rare because, yeah, you'd get the win, and what would happen immediately after would be that everyone would get on your case and be like, well, okay, congrats on the win. You also just showed that you can't trust yourself to win, and you had to rely on hoping that you got lucky with this matchup. And so that was almost never the case. I can count on like one hand, not even using all my fingers, the amount of times I saw something like Gliscor Baton Pass in Smogon Tour. And whenever that did happen, then whoever used it would get eviscerated by like everyone. No one wants to be that guy wanted to be that guy using Gliscor Pass. Here's the post I was looking for. Yeah, no one wanted to be that guy, and this extended to other ways of kind of cheating the system with like excessive counter teams, for example. And I'm not talking my opponent never prepares for Superachi, so I'm bringing Superachi, because that's not an example of a gross counter team, because Superachi is just a good Pokemon. You're going to want to use Superachi in a lot of games anyway. No, I'm talking specifically things like, in Smogon Tour, once there was a French player known for spamming Abomasnow. So, Eternal, this one player, he was a great player, but he put HP Fire on his Suicune for the Abomasnow. It didn't even KO, so it wound up looking even stupider. But like, and everyone clowned him for it. And rightfully so, because it's a stupid, stupid move to have on Suicune. This was Gen 4. There was no Ferrothorn. So, things like that. Nowadays, I don't think that whoever did that would be clowned. It would be like, well, whoever... And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I have a way that I personally think the game should be played, but that's, for another video, and I have my reasons for that. Not the sanctity of the game or whatever. Well, I guess I can say it now because I think it'll contextualize the rest of what I'm talking about. It's more that I think that the way to play the game is to learn how to trust yourself, and you'll be able to make plays, not just out-predicting your opponent, but just understand the game well enough to where you know your team and you know how to use it, and you don't have to pull what we would refer to as a cheap trick. You don't have to hope that your opponent is haplessly unprepared for so-and-so. I'm not saying don't use surprising things. Catching your opponent off guard is a big part of being successful in tournaments, but you don't have to put it all on the line and, well, if this doesn't work out, then that's that and I lose. You should be able to trust yourself to play the game. And stuff like Baton Pass and cheese in general, that tends to take the game out of your hands as well. Because if your BP team doesn't have a good matchup, you're not playing your way out of that. You're pretty much toast. And that's why cheese, I think it's silly, because I don't think that, I or anyone needs such a big advantage over another player that they have to literally take the potential to play the game out of their own hands. Like in the case of BP, because you get that bad matchup and you win or lose by that matchup. And that's what a lot of what constitutes cheese. And there's very little playing to be done about it. Now, we can have an argument over what constitutes cheese. People do that all the time. But I'm talking about the egregious, undeniable examples. Your hardcore BP teams and such. And so I don't think that stuff is necessary. And that's the change in culture, mentality, whatever, over the past, let's call it, decade that this video is about. So here's the post I wanted to mention. You can counter BP teams in advance. This is from a player named Carl, who was around in the old days, in the net battle days. And here's the post. He's going off of what Sinray said about the culture. We all wanted to win, but the difference was we also wanted to win by being the best, outplaying the best, by playing the game. And this is what a lot of people say now when they talk about the best players. It's not about the result. It's about how they played the game. And that was a lesson I learned very early on. Because you're not showing that you're good by, showing up and getting lucky with your matchup or whatever it is that you're rolling the dice on. No, you show you're good by understanding the game and playing the game with that understanding. So, it's used as a crutch, and I mean that's cheese in general, and it's become more and more popular. So, it's not sporting. Yeah, so that's the basic idea of the culture factor. And that goes along with the thing from Gen 4 that I was saying, where if you use something like Gliscor Pass, then you will just get absolutely excoriated by everyone. And you would become known as that guy who, tries to cheese. It's like, oh, that guy's not going to try and take you on in a fair fight most of the time. He's going to try and do something, sneakier that you're not going to be able to handle. It's basically giving it all up to a team matchup, whether it's BP or something else. Obviously, BP is being mentioned so much here because it is the poster child for this. But the shifting culture came, during the times of Gen 6, Gen 7, when people started, caring less about what players thought about them. And that I couldn't tell you where that came from exactly. They just decided, hey, I want that win. It's about getting that tournament result. And so I guess you could say, the greater emphasis on tournaments or something. I don't know. Greater emphasis on tournaments, greater community. There's probably something to that effect. But yeah, whereas before, the idea of bringing BP to Smogon Premier League or World Cup was just unthinkable. Now it was happening regularly. Shake It Up, for example, was racking up record points in Smogon Tour with Gliscor Pass. And to that you could say another shift was, hey, don't blame the cheese bringers, let's say, for using something that wins so much that it might just be broken. And that's another argument you can make for cheese. Like, hey, this thing might just be really busted. You might need to address it via some tiering action. And so that's something else. And it's hard to see where the line is necessarily, because it's got to be used in order to get banned, like in the case of Gen 5 Sun, for example. That was another form of cheese that really took over the metagame for a while, because it's, not to say that cheese completely takes the game out of players' hands, but it very often removes interaction from the equation, and that's the antithesis of what good competitive Pokemon is supposed to be about: interaction between two players. So that cultural shift led to BP getting banned, which is a good thing, of course. But in general, it went beyond just strategies that were eventually busted. It wasn't just, hey, I'm going to BP in this important game because I want the win above all else. That happened a lot. What really happened, two things. The second thing that I wanted to say was that there were non-broken strategies that people would just pray with. but there was this idea, and this one I won't really hide my dislike for, because I just don't like the mentality behind it at all. It was basically this idea that, hey, I am not the favored player in this matchup, so I am just going to I'm just going to hope that I get lucky with whatever form of cheese. And that is something I really dislike, because you saw this happening more and more, and I guess it also coincided with people realizing, hey, a lot of the time the optimal way to play Pokemon is to play for the odds, which is also a relatively new phenomenon in the grand scheme of things. But it wound up being, hey, I don't think I can beat this player in a head-on in an even matchup or whatever, and so I'm just going to raise the odds. And this started getting praised. And now I understand the idea that yes, if you're not favored, you want to raise the odds. And take the game more out of your opponent's hand. But what I don't like about it is the defeatist attitude behind it. The whole, no way I ever beat this guy if I just, do my best. So I'm just going to pray and, hope it works out. Just because it's such a shortcut. It's such an easy way out. Because you can just say, oh, well, I don't think I'm going to beat so-and-so, I don't think I'm going to beat so-and-so. And you started seeing this in tournament battles all the time, especially team tournaments, where some player would get sacrificed to someone else, to a star on the opposing team, and you would just say, oh, just give him some cheese and hope it works out. Instead of, and it wasn't just in team tournaments, but instead of any effort made to try and improve and beat the other player head on, it just became more, hey, we're going to just pray, we're gonna hope it works out. And that I don't like, because it was like this self-imposed plateau became a widespread thing, where it was like, well, you could also try and get better and beat the opposing player that way. But, it's not like they're unbeatable. As great as McMegan or whoever is, there's only so many moves they can make. Put it this way, the greatest Pokemon players of all time have a win rate of about, somewhere in the high 50s to mid 60%. It's really not that obscene to conceive of someone, of a player like that getting toppled. You see upsets all the time, and a lot of the time those upsets aren't even necessarily just in the form of getting cheesed out. It's also in the form of just that player who is the underdog just playing really well, which tends to have similar results. But it just became, I know I'm repeating myself, but I really want to drive home the difference in culture, because, yeah, I don't know, it's just, it's completely, I have had arguments about this with a lot of people, because I feel strongly about it. And the way it's basically explained is, yes, I want to raise the odds if I'm not favored, but I don't like the idea of just accepting the loss on even grounds, and just hitting the prayer button, because then whenever that happens, and then you actually get into the game, and then you realize you're doing fine, and then you realize I would have been fine with so and so regular team. And you realize you don't need to take the game out of your own hands. So, yeah, I'm kind of repeating myself. But again, it's not just BP. Like, here we have an example of Gen 5 Sun, which we're definitely not going to go into long term, because this game was insanely long. But, yeah, the fact it became such a norm, and not just in newer generations where there's lots of crazy stuff to abuse, but just like in Gen 5 OU in particular, it's been common just because of the sheer power of crazy things like that. But I mean, people are all too happy to, do. Okay, like here's a great example that has nothing to do with BP, because I mean, we also did see this SPL finals game, which just had a full pass stuff going on. But in that same finals, then you also saw this Auras game. And for anyone wondering, no, Meowstick is not a... I'm pretty sure this is the only time I have ever seen Meowstick in XY or Auras OU tournament play ever. And it's just pretty much the worst gimmick of all time. And, Stealth Rock goes up and the game is over. And it's pretty much just this whole... Yeah, we're pretty much going to forfeit the slot, but maybe we'll get lucky. And I really don't think that it's needed, and that's why I wanted to make this video, because it is interesting to me that, because I remember when new players would come around all the time, they would want to show off how good they are, and this is not me saying that you shouldn't use the best tools to win. Obviously, if whatever cheesy strategy is so good that it's winning consistently, use that. Because if it's really that good, then it's probably not even cheese. It's just good. But I'm speaking not just to now banned BP strategies, but in general, things like this Meowstick team, or staying in on Pokemon you shouldn't stay in on for a marginal advantage, like in Gen 3, if you have a Scarm that stays in on Zapdos lead, because no way it's Mata Zapdos that also uses Thunderbolt on this turn, and even if it does, then I have a good chance to live. I'm favored to live and not get Parafull, Parrot, or Crit. So cheesy stuff like that has become more and more popular, and I don't know. I wish that I would see players, I guess, believe in themselves more, because whenever you ask them why, they're cheesing. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't think I was gonna win in a regular game, and it's like, well, that seems to happen a lot. That these players don't think they're capable of winning in a regular game, and I think if you bring a regular good team and play as well as you can, then that's much better than just these blowout games, which are pretty much just prayers right from turn one. But I mean, on any given day, anyone can beat anyone. Not just through silly stuff, but I'll leave us with this little this thread from a few SPLs ago, where ZF was talking about his teams, and we're not going to go into the details, but he's talking about his game versus Solwind and his different approaches that he could use, and different approaches to using against Solwind. I could muscle past with Dragmag, I could cheese him with a Volcarona, or engage in a friendly balance mirror. And just the idea to be so open, like, yeah, you know what, I might just cheese him. I might just, that is so, again, it's not my way of playing the game, but, I don't know, yeah, I think I've said everything that I should say at this point, and I've already repeated myself a lot. So thank you for watching. I am interested to know your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one.